Hello, I'm Patrick Watson. Already on Venture, we've done a couple of stories about businesses that almost got hurt by their own success. And tonight you can drop the word almost. This is a story about genius in the toolroom and disaster in the boardroom. If you work for the federal government or a crown corporation or any one of hundreds of other Canadian offices, you've probably at least walked by one of these word processors. Great Canadian invention. You didn't know the video screen word processor was invented in Canada, did you? Great news. But in the high-tech world, generation gap's down to about 6 weeks, and this outfit missed a couple of generations. One mistake led to another until now. They're spending millions of dollars, taxpayers' dollars, trying to get back into orbit. This entire edition of Venture is devoted to the story about how that company first took off like a rocket and faltered and is now trying to relight its boosters. Venture's Peter Raymont has been in the thick of it all. He starts the story in 1 minute.
There's something new in the neighborhood. Who are you going to call? Gangbusters!
The annual product kickoff. Here in a downtown Toronto hotel, the sales team is boogieing to Wangbusters. Wang Business Machines is the competition they have to beat.
I ain't afraid of no Wang.
Wang is now the Rolls-Royce of office automation that they used to be, and are trying to persuade themselves they can be again.
Where are we coming from? Putting it another way, what are the roots of AES? So what I think we should do is we should focus on those things where we are best.
10 years ago, this industry didn't exist. Today, it's one of the hottest in the world. Trouble is, it's also one of the most competitive and fastest changing. Hundreds of companies have tried and failed to make their fortunes here. This is one of them, AES. In the last couple of years, AES has lost $25 million. This year, these salesmen have got to turn a profit. Nothing special about that, but there are two unusual things about AES. First, it's the Canadian company that invented the word processor in the first place. And second, you, I, and the Canadian taxpayer own half the company. We're propping it up.
The AES story began here, in the northwest suburbs of Montreal. Up on the second floor at Industrial Screw and Machine, 28-year-old Stephen Dorsey was spending his father's money trying to invent the next generation of business machines.
A greatness in design or direction comes from reduction, from reducing and reducing and reducing until there's just only one obvious product to have and one obvious direction and one look to the product.
But Dorsey and his team hadn't found that direction until a breakthrough in 1965 that seemed to point them at their destiny.
The beginning of the breakthrough is that we invented a microprocessor prior to the little chips that were on the market that allowed us to develop just about any product in that category, like a word processor or a remote control system, about with 1/5 the engineering of the older way of doing it with just discrete components.
It was the world's first programmable video screen word processor, the AES 90.
I mean, there were a lot of controversies in word processing in those days. One, people said you don't need the floppy disk, you should use the magnetic card. Others said, who needs screens? They seem obvious today.
Dorsey's group had a great machine, but they'd only made 10 of them.
It was really at that point where we sort of got hurt by success.
It was a classic dilemma. They had no factory, no marketing plan, and no money.
Got nervous. I said, what are we doing in a new venture like this? They pulled the plug on us, and we couldn't finance the systems that were going out. So we had to, our financials, despite the fact we're getting units out, our financial situation deteriorated. And that's when we had to start looking for venture capital, which was almost non-existent in those days.
That was mistake number one, waiting until they were in trouble before looking for that venture capital. By 1974, AES was bankrupt. But a venture capital company called Innocan smelled a bargain. Innocan paid the receiver a pittance and put in their marketing expert, Walter Steele, to make AES grow.
Well, at the time I got there, I don't think there was even a name. It was a prototype box, engineering box. We spruced it up and started to sell it to the government first and some other people. and it evolved. Very quickly, we also identified what the next product line should be, and we started working on that, which became the Plus.
At AES, we believe that simpler is better.
The AES Plus and then the Alpha Plus were great word processors in their day.
As a keyboard, just like a typewriter, incredibly simple.
What made them fly was a marketing campaign that within a year made AES Canada's fastest growing company, selling more than it could produce.
Incredibly simple, simply incredible.
And that really is what the big business in AES was with the Plus. It was very, very exciting, the fast lines of communications, very fast decision making. We had great support from the Inacan people in our decision process. We had horrors with the banks. We had no money. And we were an upstart company that, if we listened to everyone involved, there's no chance of surviving when you were competing with IBM. AES grew to actually outsell IBM in the same related field in all of Canada and a good part of the United States.
But AES didn't have IBM's sales muscle. To crack the giant U.S. market, Steele needed a partner. He found one here in Atlanta, an aggressive distributor named Lanier. Lanier became AES's sales arm in the U.S.
In business, starting small and thinking big is no problem.
Lanier christened the AES Plus the No Problem and spent millions with this pitch during Monday night football games.
Dividing, growing, and achieving success.
It was a hit. Lanier sold out its entire first-year allotment in just 3 months.
Working together. Lanier today, no problem tomorrow.
The product was outstanding.
Lanier's president, Gene Milner.
Doyce invented it. I guess other engineers improved it. At that time, it was outstanding. We just were selling it as fast as we could put on enough salesmen. It was sweeping the country and doing extremely well.
Now it was Steele's turn to run out of money. Steele had visions of grandeur. AES was already big, but he wanted it to be bigger, much, much bigger. Inacan, the little venture capital company that had plucked AES from the mud, didn't have the kind of money he needed to make it happen. He needed a bigger partner. And that set him up for mistake number 2, a mistake that eventually brought Canada's most promising high-tech company to its knees. How it happened after the break.
We're following the story of a big Canadian business that started out as an inventor's idea and then grew. It's the story of AES, a company that some people once thought might become another IBM. But it's also the story of a lot of bright people making a lot of mistakes. We've seen how the inventors of this word processor let themselves run out of money on the way to the factory floor. That was the first big mistake. It cost those guys the company. AES was picked up by a small investment house called Inacan. And the new president, Walter Steele, cracked the U.S. market. But then their success began to run away with them. To meet the demand, they needed more factories, more salesmen, more designers, more everything, especially money to pay for all that. And in 1978, they were on the verge of making their second big mistake. Peter Raymont continues the story.
The company they turned to was Pierre Trudeau's Canada Development Corporation, the CDC. The CDC is a peculiar mix of public and private enterprise, owned half by private shareholders and half by the Canadian taxpayers, that has a mandate to invest in key industries. CDC first invested in mines, oil, and gas. Then it started looking around for something sexier.
We were looking around for industries with growth potential.
CDC President Tony Hampson.
Office automation, or as it's now called, as one of those fields, and we could see getting into it through word processing and gradually developing software and communications skills as being one of the routes. And Inacan did have this investment in AES. It was growing rather rapidly. It was outgrowing Inacan's ability to finance it.
Walter Steele would have preferred a company that knew something about the world of high tech. The CDC didn't, but they did have money. And in September 1978, steel sold out to Tony Hampson's CDC. That was mistake number 2. AES found an owner that didn't understand its business.
It did not come about the way we wanted. And along came Canada Development Corporation, who knew us very well, and took us out of our misery by paying more than anyone else would have.
It turned out to be an unhappy match. Walter Steele stayed on to run the company, but he couldn't get fast decisions from the CDC on the kind of products AES should make next. In high tech, dawdling can be fatal. The CDC was too wrapped up in its other businesses, and its boardroom was too far away. Angry and hurt, Steele quit.
It's like having your baby taken away. That's right. It's when you build a company, you put your heart and soul into it, and when it breaks up, it's gut-wrenching.
Was there no alternative?
Was I going to change CDC?
After Steele's departure, AES slipped even further. First, they'd forgotten about their technology. Then they forgot about their customers. Their U.S. distributor, Gene Milner, was getting upset.
If you touched the machine, the static from your body would just erase the disc. All your type is gone. Too bad. Oh, God, the customers all over the country were driving us, calling us, driving us crazy. They were going out of their mind. And they've worked and messed around for 2 or 3 weeks. And I mean, customers are typing every day, and they're losing their typing, and they're going nuts. So I called, and they sent us down a cure, and we waited. And it was wrapping Reynolds wrap around the cord between the printer and the word processor. And I thought, I'm losing my mind. I'm going insane. A $14,000 typewriter, and you wrap Reynolds wrap. Actually, it was some kind of aluminum foam, but it doesn't make it look like Reynolds wrap. And you tell the customer you're going to wrap that, and that's going to give them a grounding. I'm going absolutely insane.
The facts just don't support Gene on that.
Tony Hampson has another version of the story.
$5 million to 160 or 70 million, and a big chunk of those were in the U.S. And we, for a while gained market share. Where we started to lose it was when Lanier started getting their own sales force confused with their own product and ours, and their customers, too.
My mother said...
By now, Milner was fed up with AES. He felt Wang and IBM climbing up his back, and he came out with his own word processor, the Easy One, in direct competition with the AES product. By 1981, the relationship between Lanier and AES was falling apart. Each side blamed the other, and AES was afraid of being left high and dry, without a pipeline into the giant U.S. market. So when a U.S. investment dealer approached the CDC with a proposition, the CDC leapt at it. The proposition was a U.S. copier company called Savin, with annual sales of over $400 million and a purchase price for majority ownership of just $75 million. It seemed like a bargain. The CDC saw the deal as a great marriage, but the Savin purchase turned out to be their next high-tech folly. The story continues in a minute.
The year was 1982. The world's first video screen processor company had changed hands, grown, changed hands again, and now was controlled by Canada Development Corporation, CDC. The little machine that was invented with private money was now using public funds to look for a world market, but disaster struck. The American distributor lost faith in the company. But CDC, Canada Development, still had a lot of confidence in the rosy future of high tech, and if AES couldn't find an American distributor on its own, then CDC would buy it one. That was mistake number 3.
This is Savin, nestled in the hills of southern New York State. In 1982, the Canada Development Corporation bought control for $75 million. Savin makes and sells photocopiers, and not so long ago, it even outsold Xerox. The idea behind the purchase was that Savin could sell AES's word processors as well. It didn't work out. That same year, Savin got caught in a vicious price war. Savin's dealers weren't exactly interested in taking on a new line of business. Last year, Savin lost $61 million US. And today, it's in far worse shape than AES. And the CDC is not one problem company, but two. This is Serge Gouin. He's the man who's trying to turn Savin around.
Companies that perform such services with users, and they are, in terms of customer satisfaction, they rank first in the industry. Really?
Serge Gouin used to work in Canada for the Canada Development Corporation, and it was his idea to buy Savin in the first place.
It's not very sexy, but it does work, and it puts out a lot of copies every month.
There was $771,000 reduction in spending.
The CDC made the same mistake here at Savin that it did at AES. It didn't keep its eye on the business.
The primary change there is the reduction in the overhead expense, lower indirect salaries plan, fringes.
Finally, 1 year ago, Serge Gouin was sent down here to salvage the investment. His job is to shake up the management, get some new product out the door, and do everything he can to cut costs. He's already sold the company jet and 3 helicopters.
The concern was that you have some dealers up here in this part of your country, and if they hear this is not enough information to answer the question, does this impact on the 8,000?
Today, senior management figure out how to relocate 330 workers at one of their subsidiaries, MLI.
Obviously, I think the town and the people aren't going to be too happy about it, but also the people recognize that MLI has not been a good business, and there are things that need to be done, and it's how it's presented.
Serge Gouin admits that if he had to do it again, he'd do it differently.
It's easy to do Monday morning quarterbacking, and obviously if you knew what happened, you wouldn't have done it, or you would have done it otherwise. I think the latter would be my conclusion. I think we should have done it a little differently. We should have been more closely involved with the company. We picked some very good people, very talented people, who had good reputations, and we gave them a free hand in running the company the way they thought they should, without being on their backs all the time and without checking as much as we should have. And I think that's the one lesson maybe to learn from this venture, that you cannot let people loose for too long.
Like AES, Savin badly needs new customers. Gouin thinks he'll get them with a new kind of technology that cranks out much better copies than Xerox. He's betting on this new machine, the Savin 8000, to turn a big profit. But getting the 8000 to market will be very expensive, and Gouin will need a lot more cash to do it.
The cost of launching the 8000 this year, of completing all the engineering, all the testing that needs to be done, and starting to build inventory, we've estimated to be in the neighborhood of $55–60 million.
Where will the money come from? Probably from the taxpayers, who own half the CDC. And the Canada Development Corporation is still trying to fix its problems at its other high-tech firm, AES.
Bonjour, AES. Good afternoon.
Businesses are like families. The problem children get the attention. So at AES too, the CDC has finally sent in its own man to clean things up. Ken Gibson is AES's 5th president in as many years. Gibson has hacked away at costs and lowered AES's bank debt by $20 million.
John Augustus should be in Sweden at this moment?
Norway.
Norway?
His strategy to save AES is really very simple. It's to convince everyone who works here that AES's most important corporate mission is to keep the customers happy.
Trying to make sure that everybody does things in an AES way.
But all those rich American customers are still eluding him.
Okay, can we hear about the successes or otherwise we're having in the U.S. marketplace, Barry?
Okay. We've got...
He has a new agreement with Lanier in Atlanta, but it's a non-exclusive deal, and Lanier is not showing much action.
Meet with some of the programs people from Lanier, and we talked about the 7300 and the standalone 7165. unfortunately, the inventory situation that they have down there precludes them from coming up with much more enthusiasm than they're showing.
If Lanier doesn't start performing, Gibson may have to set up his own distribution network. But that would cost a bundle, and Ken Gibson doesn't have a bundle.
You and I together, okay, because unless we hear noises that they're either going to aggressively support our new product line, we're really going to have to examine the whole situation.
Okay.
But Ken Gibson knows that AES can't afford to do everything well. It's got to concentrate on one strategy, and he's chosen marketing. AES really didn't have much choice. Their products are based on technology that's now 7 years old, and AES has lost its edge so long that catching up would be almost impossible. In this business, it happens all the time, but some people can't forget that AES was almost a world beater.
AES had the greatest opportunity to be another mini IBM or what have you. It's just one of the saddest things that ever happened in my business career to see it have gone so badly and to have had retrenched so far. I think that the people running it now are doing a much better job and will probably end up straightening out and have a very strong company, but it is such a shame what we wasted in years and dollars and opportunity. It's really heartbreaking.
Yes, I think it's a crime that it didn't become a very large, successful Canadian company. Hopefully it will be. Hopefully they will turn it around. Maybe they will. I hope so. I truly hope so, because we need some more winners in Canada.
You think they have a chance?
It'll be tough. Be really tough.
The first winner from the Central Region, Michael Beckersoff from Hamilton.
But to these hot young AES salespeople, the years of drift are nothing but history now. At the annual New Products Kickoff in Toronto, the top performers pick up their awards. Even though they missed last year's sales targets, they had a record month in December. And they're convinced the new policy of keeping the customers happy is starting to pay off.
There's a certain irony to the new turnaround strategy here at AES. Ken Gibson has decided to focus AES on selling and servicing its products, not inventing new ones. From now on, he'll be buying his good ideas from Europe, from the United States, wherever he can get them. AES products may make it back into the heart of the office, but chances are they won't be made in Canada. One thing is certain. No matter how good the product and how good these salesmen are at selling them, the CDC's adventures in high technology are going to cost the Canadian taxpayer a lot more money before AES and Savin climb back into the black.
Peter, I just realized I've sat with you through the development of this whole piece and never asked you why they're not going to make the things in Canada anymore.
Well, I guess Ken Gibson just doesn't want to deal with the expense or the risk of the investment that he'll have to put into research and development. In high technology, it's really very expensive, and for years the company was being run by the engineering side, and he's a marketing man, and he wants to get out there and sell and service those products.
Of all the mistakes we chronicled, what do you think the biggest one was?
Well, I guess the mistake was that for the CDC, AES and Savin weren't big deals, and small investments for that holding company, and they just let them drift for too long.
Thanks, Peter. Next week on Venture, the story of a British Columbia multimillionaire who's working for the government for $1 a year. I'm Patrick Watson.